life and death is all one and the same. Without life, there's no death. Without death, there's no life. A warrior walks into the afterlife with no fear.
Welcome back to Mulligan Brothers. Today's video, as always, was sponsored by Huel. I'm drinking Huel Black Edition, which has 26 vitamins and minerals, 35 grams of protein and slow release carbs to make sure that I can stay satiated and proteined up whilst I make these documentaries. If you want to find out more about these, go to the link in the description. I'll talk about them a little bit later on in the video.
So how would you describe this room? What's within the room?
This is my war room. So the war room encompass all my travels, encompass my studies in warfare. My studies in warfare stems back to samurai. It stems back to Budo, the way of the combat side of being samurai. But it goes off of a code called Bushido. All right. So what I do is, having been a warrior in the special forces, when I got out, I lost my way, and I found myself again through the practice of Zen, which is one of the teachings of how a samurai lives. The samurai, back during war-stating periods, Japan, the samurais live their life in beauty, but they possess this lethal skill. Right. And it is said that the samurai is the twofold ways, a pen and sword. At one portion of my life, I focused more on the fire, which is the combat side of being Budo. But after I got out of the military, I was very off balance. So I found my way through spirituality again, through the teachings of samurai. So once I started working on myself, I started traveling around America, and I started teaching communities, started teaching law-abiding citizens and law enforcement officers and military. And I do that so they could better protect their families and their homes. And I, being in the special forces, I have force multiply armies before. And now in this time in America, with the rise in crime, families do need to protect themselves. So I give them that skill set of Budo, the teachings of samurai, but in a modern day sense, in a modern day sense, as in weapons has changed, but the ideals of what makes a warrior doesn't. So when I travel around America, I flew the Ronin flag. Within samurai culture, each samurai has his clan that he will carry the war banner into battle. So I made the war banner that I carried into teaching, right, in this stage of my life. In the teachings of Bushido, right, Bushido. Bu means to intercept, to stop, to go to war, right? Shi is the one who walks this path. And Do is where I am now, is to take my whole life lesson and to give back to the sake of humanity. And that's very Confucius, right? To work on oneself. If we want the world to be a better place, then it starts with you. So at first I started with me. And when I became Ronin, I started traveling around America, and I started giving back in the Do portion of a warrior, is to give back to better humanity. So this was the war banner that I flew my first 3 years. After 3 years, I do retire my war banner, and it gets framed, and then I fly a different war banner for the next 3 years. What's unique about this chain armor? This is over, 400 plus years old, but what's really unique and why this is in here is that this is Ronin. See, Ronin is not glamorous, it's torn, it's seen war. You can see that it's been cut, right? It's been shot. So why is this summarized Ronin is because the story of the 47 Ronins was that the shogun wanted to hold this political party, and he wanted the daimyo, the most powerful daimyo, which is daimyo is a warlord, a landlord. So back during that time, if a farmer or a merchant wished to set up a farm or sell stuff as a merchant, then they had to pay the daimyo, the landlord, and through taxes. And then that land is ruled by the daimyo's private military, private army, which is samurai. And the samurais ruled over those lands by the way of two swords. And this right here, this story is that he tasked the daimyo, the powerful daimyo, to host this ceremony. He called all the other feudal lords into the area. They talked. The daimyo that was in charge is very insulting, likes to degrade others. The 47 Ronin's daimyo drew his sword on the council out of anger. He was, if you do that, then that's against the law. And he was automatically sentenced. He was automatically sentenced as dishonor. But then the shogun said, okay, I'll give you back your honor if you split your belly open in my courtyard in the art of sabakyu. So sabakyu is a suicidal ritual where they dig a dagger into their abdomen and then rip it into this side and reinsert the dagger and rip it out this side. That's to retain honor. And people are like, why would you do that, right? Because if you're a samurai, you're born into this noble bloodline. You have the riches, you have the lands, right? You have the status. So if your honor is taken away, your family is ripped away from that status, bloodline and all, generations from there on. So it's within a samurai to hold and retain that honor. So, the daimyo, he split open his belly, and then the shogun said the 46 Ronins, 46 were sentenced to be Ronins. Back during that period in Japan, a samurai is meant to serve, right? He serves one lord, a daimyo. So when you get cast away from society and you can't serve, that means you can't be a merchant. You cannot be a farmer. You still have to walk with dual swords because by status, you're a warrior class. But because you don't serve anybody, you're a Ronin. And that's very disgraceful back then because you have no master, you're unemployed, right? So these Ronins, right, they swore an oath to each other, the clan, that they will return in 1 year and they will revenge the death of their daimyo. So these Ronins, they basically became bums, some became drunks, right? And what happened was the daimyo employed spies to see if these Ronins were walking the Bushido code. Are they going to take back revenge? But what the spies report is they lost their way. But in actuality, these bums were doing reconnaissance. They were looking at the walls, the length of the walls, the ladders they need to build. They're studying the patterns of life, the timing, right? The guards. When was the daimyo returning? When was he leaving? What is the pattern of life for that year? Within that year, they returned back and they executed one of the most successful assaults to date. I studied this when I was in the Special Forces, and I tell you, one of the most successful assaults because of their ability to gather intelligence and communicate through clandestine means, very special forces for its time. So they were able to scale the walls. They executed the guards. They got to the daimyo. They split his head open. They cut his head off. And then they walked back to their daimyo's grave site where they wash the head in this pool. And they set the head perfectly groomed and combed into their daimyo's tomb to retain their honor because they served their lord unto death. Then they walked back to the shogun's home and they said, this is what I did. The shogun was so taken back that they were in prison roughly like 30 days, right? They were in prison because he did not know what to do with them because look, it was during peacetime Japan. War stating period was over. Tokugawa shogunate brought peace to Japan. So samurais during that period forgot what it means to be samurai, forgot what it means to be a warrior. And these 47 Ronins, the 47th Ronin was the son of the leader, right? And the 47 Ronins, they basically displayed what Bushido was, to follow on their lord unto death, to serve one's lord, no matter what, even if your honor is taken away from you. See, that's the significance with this story, is that it took place after war-stained periods Japan, when samurais forgot what it meant, when a warrior forgot what it meant to be a warrior. You know, and these Ronins reminded them, honor unto death. Nobody can take your honor, only you. So the Shogun finally came up with his decision. He says, I will retain your honor. I will give you back your honor, you Ronins. You will be samurai, but you're going to split your belly open in my courtyard. So 46 of these Ronins did that. As the sakura bloomed, the cherry blossom bloomed in the courtyard of the emperor, 46 split their bellies open. The 47th was left alive because he was the son of the leader to tell the story of the 47 Ronins. So this is very Ronin. That's why it's in this room. So this is a lot of the Bushido teachings. As you can see, the Book of Five Rings scroll that was written by Miyamoto Masashi, a word written in a Buddhist cave, the Redondo Cave, back in 1645. So this Ronin meditated for 3 years. He finally written down the 5 elements of the Book of Five Rings, you know. So this is the Book of Fire. Fire is, you know, in the teaching, is to meet one's enemy without fear, the teachings of war and combat. And the 47 Ronins, the bottle caps, the faces of these legends, ninja stars, throwing weapons. What I love about this collection is these are ancient weapons. These are ancient designs. Some of the designs that I was able to replicate in the modern era, but these were made to fight. These are fighting weapons, right? And there's a certain mythology and style that comes to the blade design and the blade and the thickness and the mass behind the lead and edge of the blade. Every samurai had a fan. So a samurai would carry away 2 swords and he'll carry a fan. Not just because, you know, it was hot during that time, there was no AC, but the fan was also a status symbol. This was made for me in Japan by an artist. As you can see, Ronin is written on the fan on the right side with my name. The significance of the tea, right? The tea and the teacup here is that first, the koi fish. You can see the koi fish in this teacup. The story is that a koi fish swims upstream and it swims against the struggles of life. And sometimes this koi fish, as it swims up to the top of the mountain, right? Sometimes the koi fish can lose its way. The current could be so strong that it may slip back and find another path. But in the end, it says when the koi fish reaches the top of the mountain, when it peaks over the mountain, and then becomes a dragon. Because when the koi fish peaks over the mountain, the dragon is what surfaces on the other side, symbolizing rebirth and the renewing of one's mind. A dragon is fearless. A dragon has no limits. A dragon gives and protects, right? So a dragon knows who he is in life and does not serve somebody else's truth. So that's the significance of the teacup. But also the teacup too is that, you know, as in life, we must empty out our cups, right? And we just absorb what is useful. And if you have a full cup, then how can you retain any new knowledge? So you must dump out the knowledge in order to retain what is new, which is knowledge. And then you can see the warrior monk. Within time, they said the story was that the monk, a lot of warriors during war-stained periods will become monks after war because the path of a warrior, Bushido, in the Do phases, right, in order for you to be able to give back for the good of humanity, you have to renew your mind. You have to change yourself just like water. You have to flow like water. And what the monk did was that a lot of warriors after war-stained periods, they would study spirituality, they would study self, Confucius, right? So they became these warrior monks. And the story was that these warriors got together and they set up these temples, and then these bandits came in, they burned down the temples, and they they commit all these crimes in these lands, and these monks who only wanted a life of peace became warrior monks. And it's said that these warrior monks descended from the temples and crushed the enemies of these bandits. And they protected the lands. And in time, they taught the villages. They taught the farmers how to be warriors because they got tired of their villages and their temples burning down. And in time, these farmers became insurgents. And what the monks taught them was guerrilla warfare. And in time, the names that were placed on these people in this clan was ninjas, shinobis. So this knife was given to me in Dallas in my public speaking venue. It was made by one of my ex-teammates. This is a Special Forces design. He was a Special Forces sniper, and he was able to design this blade. But what I thought was really cool was Ronin. And he made this blade for us. So we have a lot of blades that were given to us by our students, by our fans. So, I knew what I wanted to do since I was 11. I wanted to be a Special Forces guy. But when I first joined the military, there was no direct entry into the Special Forces. So I first started off with the 82nd Airborne Division at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. I went to Ranger School when I was 19 years old, and then I went into a amphibious long-range reconnaissance team. When I was 20 years old, I applied for the Special Forces because I was fast-tracking in promotion. I received a rank of E5 in a year and a half in the Army, so that qualified me for Special Forces training. Going to Special Forces training at 21 years old was very hard, right? We have a high nutrition rate. People do wash out. But I had the mindset that a Bushido, I will die for this. So I went through Special Forces training in 97 and graduated, got to the Special Forces A teams in Okinawa, Japan, later on that year in 97. I started with Special Forces, went to the more of the counter-terrorist side of the house, which is the Team SIF guys. Went into Iraq, cross-train, counter-tracking. So basically we're training how to track down human beings in a jungle environment through smell, through tracks, through scent. So we would live in Malaysia for roughly a month for survival, and then I rotated back, and then I did tracking school, which was a month and a half long, and then we rotated back in again and did jungle warfare training. So a lot of time in my younger years learning jungle warfare and understanding that type of warfare. Went into southern Thailand, counter drug missions where local villagers will come into villages and enslave women and children into the drug trade and human trafficking. So we went down south to train the counter-terrorist teams, and then this is southern Thailand where we went in to interdict these drug labs. In Bushido, the way of the warrior, in Bushido, at this portion of my life, I was in Bu, which was to stop evil, to intercept the spear. So, like I said, Bushido's lifelong, and that's a journey for life, a warrior's path. The Tashi sword, this is a 500 plus year old Tashi. And what's really significant about samurai swords, when we're talking about authentic samurai swords, is that, after World War II, General MacArthur, basically in the surrender treaty, the Japanese had to turn in all their samurai swords. And General MacArthur was disbanding the Bushido code, the warrior's code. So every sword that you see went underground. So every sword that is authentic in here had to go into hiding. It went underground because the swords that got turned in were destroyed and banded. all the writings of Bushido were burned. So what you see in these scrolls, the original scrolls, was hidden in baseboards underneath houses and handed down through generations of war and bombings in their countries and earthquakes. Handed down through generations of teachings. And here's the teachings of ninja, the teachings of shinobi, right? So we're going to open this later on, but this is the writings of a ninja.
If you're like me and millions of other people, you probably lead a busy life, and that's where this stuff comes in absolutely clutch. I know that I just scoop, shake, and go, and I'm ready for my day. There are other companies that are trying to do what Huel is trying to do, but they use cheap ingredients. Sometimes it requires you to take 15 pills, or preparing food, trusting supplements with subpar ingredients, and also taking 15 pills a day is just something that we don't all want to do. That's where Huel makes health possible. Black Edition has 40 grams of protein in, 26 vitamins and minerals, and every single ingredient inside this has been carefully selected by Huel's expert team. So you know you're getting the good stuff. Don't just take my word for it. Millions of other people around the world are now using Huel as part of their daily routine. People like Idris Elba, Stephen Bartlett from the Diary of a CEO, Hardest Geezer, the man who ran the entire length of Africa, was using this stuff. If you want to join the movement, go to the link down below where you can get a free t-shirt, a free shaker, and also if you subscribe to Huel, you can get 10% off every single order. This is next freaking level. Go get some.
You know, my wife and I, we travel around America, and not only do we teach and try to run our company as entrepreneurs, I find that fulfillment is a big thing for me these days. So I make time to help veterans, and this was a gift that was given to me. You can see in the back by the Veterans Project. It's a project that I go around. I give keynote speaking engagements. I try to help veterans with mental health. I try to help civilians with mental health with the mindset of Bushido. Some of the, I don't drink, or I'm actually allergic to alcohol, but I do collect things overseas. And this is from Mekong whiskeys, Thai whiskey will put you on your butt. Sake, and some of the regiments that I work with and train, and some of the units wine. So then you have the samurai teachings, right? The teachings of Bushido. They say a warrior is the twofold way of pen and sword. So you have to be educated in the ways of the warrior, right? So one of the books that stand out to me is Hakakura. Hakakura is a book that was actually written by two samurais. These samurais had a conversation for 7 years. They would sit there and had a conversation for 7 years. For 7 years, these two samurais talked about what it meant to be samurai. You see, because this book was written during peacetime Japan, when Tokugawa Ieyasu brought peace to 250 years of civil war. So the samurais that used to serve their daimyo now has nobody to really serve. There's no battles, no wars. Tokugawa brought peace. So these two samurais during peacetime Japan reflected on what it means to be samurai. What's unique about this book was this was written 100 years after war-stating periods Japan. War-stating periods. And that was the first time in history that that word Bushido was ever written in literature. Up until then, during war-stating periods, it was simply known as the way. You have other philosophy books that I really liked, like The Life-Giving Sword. You know, if the life-giving sword teaches us that as a warrior, you meet your enemies, you cut down evil, right? But as a human being, we should not take life, right? It's hard to take life. Life is beautiful. But if this tyrant, if this dictator controls and torture all his people, right? And seek to enslave them, and if you take out this tyrant, we do not save the hundreds and thousands of others. So what that book teaches you is there's life, there's evil, right? And as a warrior, we must stop evil. So there will be life. The Lone Survivor, another great book. It was the life of Masashi Miyamoto, the Ronin. What I like about Bushido, this book right here, Bushido, it talks about Bushido as a path, the way, right? Bushido. Bo means to stop, to intercept, to go to war. Shi is the one who's strong enough to walk this path, and Do is to take your life and to give back for the sake of humanity, which is tied and grounded in Confucianism, because Confucius talks about, we're all flawed as human beings, and through life, we must refine ourselves, right? We must better ourselves, and that's what Bushido is, the path. The Book of Five Rings, as you can see, multiple translations, right? Multiple translations of the book. But Masashi Miyamoto, he was born in the late 1500s, and he was a renowned swordsman, right? He was very skilled in the art of Ishiru, which he wielded the heaven and earth, which is the swords, long sword and short sword, the washitashi and the katana. He was so unconventional of his time in his sword methodology. He dueled for 67 duels and won every single one. And it was said when Masashi reached the age of 35, after he killed so many men, that he reflected on his life and he walked the path of Do, which was now humanity. So what he did was he started becoming a poet, an artist, a gardener. And in his final days, he was a master swordsman who taught his skills Arshiru. And it said that in his final years, he retreated to Kiyomoto, to the mountains of Kiyomoto, where he lived with monks in these sacred grounds. And he knew a sickness. He felt a sickness inside of him. It was stomach cancer. He was dying. And for 3 years, he worked in these sacred grounds, and it said that that's where he found his peace. And it was said within a certain hour and certain month in this cave, Redondo Cave by candlelight, he wrote the Book of Five Rings. Why is that so significant, right? The Book of Five Rings is broken down into the elements of life. Water, wind, fire, ground, void. So he broke it down into each one of these elements, void being the last, right? So Masashi taught me the teachings of each element, and in the Bushido code, in my path of Bushido, the way of the warrior, I was able to experience life in the lesson of each chapter. When to know one's enemy, to gather intelligence, right? To understand the enemy, the environment, right? Only by understanding the enemy and the environment and the intelligence can you effectively kill your enemy, right? Fire is to meet your enemy without fear, right? And that comes with a mindset. To fight like you already died, to have no fear of death, to ground yourself, right? Another teaching is to ground yourself in the teachings of education in the way of the warrior, right? Wind, and then void. I tell you, void was the hardest for me, because Masashi says that in order to perceive what is actual truth, you must die to everything of yesterday. And I was suffering, after my time in war, and I was very lost. And I read that book, Void. I never understood what that means. How can you die to everything of yesterday to perceive what is? Well, it actually goes back into Taoism, in Confucianism, where, in life, we create a narrative, right? We live in this dream on what is absolute. So what is absolute is the universe. What's absolute is the mountains, stars, moon, God. That's absolute truth. But what we place on these absolute is a narrative. A tree is only a tree. But we look at this tree and we say, wow, what a small tree. We look at this tree and we say, oh, the tree's not perfect. The tree is perfect. Life is perfect, right? But we throw this narrative. So in life, we come up with a narrative, and we travel through this world with our own narratives. You face a struggle. Either you learn from it or you repeat this. And when you learn from it, is it really failure? So Masashi in the Book of Five Rings, it's just that. You must die to your truth in order to see what is actual. And that comes with a lot of practice, right? So for many years I practiced on this, and now I understand, right? I understand what it means. In this section is Bruce Lee, right? So let me explain. Bruce Lee was really big in my era, right? Because we didn't have very much Asians, right, as role models. Think about it. Like when I came from Vietnam, I was the face of an unpopular war. There was no, Asians that were popular. It was very racist times in America. So Bruce Lee was it. And what Bruce Lee taught me was not just the Jeet Kune Do, the art of intercepting fists, but he also breaks down into the teachings of rhythm, of form, and what is martial arts? Martial arts is the proper execution from A to B, right? Flawlessly, without effort, to just live like water, without effort. A to B, effortless. Well, can we apply that to a sword, a gun? Yeah. Can we apply that to life? We can, right? So he teaches Taoism in a lot of his martial arts, but what I love about his fighting stances, he draws from Western style boxing. He draws from Shaolin Kung Fu. He draws from Judo, Jiu-Jitsu. So what I'm saying is, in the art of Budo, one must be formless, like water, right? So as a warrior, you must adapt to that environment. And the only way that you can adapt to an environment and situation is through knowledge, through intelligence, right? So if I need to operate at 18,500 feet to do a cliff assault, then I have to adapt my body and mind, right? I have to train in these environments. My body has to endure without oxygen, So what that teaches you in this, and I had this since I was a little boy, right? And you can see my collection grew, but I had this as a little boy, as a teenager. And what I learned is that do not crystallize a belief. You must be formless, like water, shapeless, right? So if you put me into a country and I have to find, fix, and locate, a bad guy, then I'm going to form to that environment based off my intelligence and understanding of the people, the terrain, the environment, the infrastructure, the technology, the political, the history. I take all this knowledge and I apply it to my execution, which is formless because I draw within different martial arts, different tactics based off of my intelligence of that environment. And that to me is formless. To close off my war years, I visit Miyamoto Musashi. As I looked at the terrain, as we were driving through this kind of misty environment, it was kind of rainy that morning. I was just driving through and I was looking at the navigation system. I can see why Musashi retreated to this area. It was secluded, it was in the mountains, so beautiful. And as we poured into the parking lot, I want to tell you, there was a huge statue, 4 stories high. This statue of Musashi meditating, and there was Bushido writing all around him. And I was so happy. I got out and I started, taking pictures. I started video, and then instantly my camera stopped working. And I was pondering on it because I just bought this camera. It worked everywhere else. I started to get upset. And my wife came up to me and she goes, just let it go, enjoy this moment. And when she said that, if I was a Ronin of the past, and I was to teach this Ronin of the future one lesson, it would be just that. To be mindful. Stop worrying about the externals. And I walked through, I finally made it to the Shinto shrine. And then I made my way into this this cave where they had a glass exhibit, all Masashi personal stuff. He was an artist, he was a gardener, he was a warrior, and he had heaven and earth there, the dual swords, heaven and earth. And as I walked out, I saw thousands of these Buddhist monuments scattered all through the landscape, ridge line to ridge line. And I reflected as I looked, I reflected, this survived earthquakes, wars. These monks, thousands, hundreds of thousands of these statues, and each one was a different face. And I walked through, and finally I came to the entryway to Masashi's cave, and there was this pagoda. This pagoda was this Japanese stone statue, and it was Bushido writings, warrior writings written from up to down, right? And then I climbed the cave, and I entered and I saw the rock where Masashi wrote the Book of Five Rings. And it was said, that the story was that Masashi in these sacred grounds, back when he was dying of stomach cancer, he had a torch. He's walking through, and it was very slippery grounds because it's islands, right? So Japan is an island. So this used to have been underwater and used to have been a coastline. So very coral reef, very slippery terrain. And it says that Masashi found this cave. And it was said that there was a boat that washed into this cave, and that's where he entered the cave. And that's where the Book Five Rings was written. Here I am in this cave. Right. And then, after Ruthie saw it, she left me there. She said, hey, you take as much time as you need. So my friend and Ruthie went downstairs, and here I am in this Buddhist cave. And so I took off my shoe and I climbed up the rock, and I sat there. I started meditating, and I remember going into that meditation process because I was there for a reason. And I closed off my warriors with forgiveness. So during that cave, in the spirit of things, that's when I forgave the world and I worked on myself. But what's really unique was that an hour away was Masashi's gravesite. It was said that his loyal retainers in his final moments in his life, when he saw death setting in, when he felt it coming in his body, in this cave, he asked his loyal retainers, his loyal students, to help him to his knees. And it said that Masashi died with sword in hand because Masashi said in his final moments, life and death is all one and the same. Without life, there's no death. Without death, there's no life. A warrior walks into the afterlife with no fear. So it said that he died in a kneeling position as a warrior. And they said that they buried his body roughly about an hour away by drive, right? And it was in these high grounds in the entrance of this castle, with this daimyo, warlord. It was said Masashi asked to be buried there to wave at the future samurais, the warriors, as they walk past, his spirit, as he sit there and watch the future warriors. But let me tell you, when I went to his final resting place, I sat down and I was looking at the error message on my camera, So I took out the battery and I put it back in. Did it at least 100 times in Masashi's cave. The camera fired up. No errors. You could take that as you want. I just take it as this, a lesson. To be present, right? Don't be mindful of the things that are outside your control. And that's what it was. This was outside my control, but yet I'm trying to control an element that I have no control over. The only thing I had control over is me and how I look at that narrative. And what I did was, remind myself that it was a beautiful morning. So the lessons from Masashi.